And thanks for joining us as we take the pulse on all things people, power, and politics from Metro Detroit to D.C. What a busy night, everybody. I'm Rupraj. Let's get right into this. The chance for President Biden to step out of the presidential race, they keep getting louder. And he held a news conference, a rare one at that, just about a few hours ago, one viewed as critical to his campaign. The night before he makes a campaign stop right here in Detroit. I'm told by my sources in Washington there are some honest conversations happening with the president before he spoke tonight. Now, before we get to that, we hit the streets to find out what you needed to hear from him tonight. Take a listen.
Coherent words, pretty much, maybe a couple sentences where he doesn't stumble. And if he can hold his own, I guess, for an extended period of time.
Too much don't really need to hear anything particular from him. I'm just impressed by his age, and I still believe that he can still run the country.
Really not much, and I'll tell you why. He's an older man. As we get older, we diminish, and I would still rather have Biden over Trump any day. That's how much I hate Trump. I will vote for Biden.
Nothing at this point, because we've already got our mind made up on who we're going to vote for, and I don't think it's going to be Biden this year.
Mission accomplished? Did you watch it? Well, we did. The night didn't start off so hot when Biden made this gaffe with Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky. Take a listen.
President Putin. President Putin. You can beat President Putin. President Zelensky. I'm so focused on beating Putin, we got to worry about it. Anyway, Mr. President.
I'm better.
You are a hell of a lot better.
Zelensky there said, I'm better. Biden joking about it, trying to clarify things and convince everybody that he's fine. You know, Putin and Zelensky are on opposite sides of the war in Ukraine, of course. Fast forwarding to tonight when he held that news conference, a rare one. The last one he had was back in November. That started, by the way, an hour later than anticipated. He was supposed to speak at 6:30. He started about 7:27. He spoke about an hour once he did, and the question about that misspeak came up.
Officials here are saying off the record that your decline has become noticeable. Hasn't this now, frankly, become damaging for America's standing in the world? Thank you.
Did you see any damage to our standing by leading this conference? Have you seen a more successful conference? What do you think? And the Putin piece, I was talking about Putin, and I said, and now, at the very end, I said, here, I mean, Putin. I said, no, I'm sorry, Zelensky. And then I added 5 other names.
You put a camera on anybody 24/7, you're going to make mistakes. An interesting take here as everybody, the entire world, watches his every word. Biden went on to say the conference was successful and said other leaders were thanking him for this summit. And he did speak clearly about several foreign policy issues, including Israel, and trying to pass along the lessons he says he learned after 9/11.
When I went to Israel immediately after the massacres that occurred at the hands of Hamas, the one thing I said to the Israelis, and I met with the War Cabinet and with Bibi, don't make the same mistake America made after bin Laden. There's no need to occupy anywhere. Go after the people who did the job. You may recall I still get criticized for it, but I was totally opposed to the occupation and trying to unite Afghanistan. Once we got bin Laden, we should have moved on.
Now, most of the news conference was held with that tone, that mood. He was sturdy, he was competent, he was calm, and he was articulate for the most part, but he also had a few issues, including this gaffe, which has many of you talking on social media. He was asked about Congress and celebrities, saying he should step aside and how that weighs into his decision to stay put, and what concerns he has about his vice president's ability to take on Trump.
I wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump to be vice president, but I think she was not qualified to be president. So let's start there. Number one, the fact is that the consideration is that I think I'm the most qualified person to run for president. I beat him once, and I will beat him again.
Now, clearly, he was talking about Vice President Harris, not Vice President Trump, when he spoke. This news conference came the same day as the first congresswoman from our state, a Democrat of West Michigan, called on Biden to step aside. Now, that West Michigan Democrat says that people can't unsee Biden's debate performance. That was 2 weeks ago. And a majority of you agree with that Congresswoman. 57% say President Biden should drop out, with 9% saying he should wait until next month to decide. This poll that I put up on X this morning has been getting a lot of action, and a lot of people now waiting to hear that news conference that happened earlier tonight. And now that they heard that, we want to know what you think as well. We have a lot to unpack tonight, and we have just the guy to do it. Oakland University political science professor Dave Dulio is with us here tonight. We thank him for staying up late with us here tonight. And this has been such an interesting one. You were with us at 6 o'clock this evening, and now you're joining us tonight. You watched that news conference, and let's take a look at this, as Dave, you always do, to zap the politics of your own preference out of this and look objectively at this man. For the majority of the hour, he spoke with fluency when it comes to foreign policy. Did you observe the same thing?
I did. I actually think President Biden is at his best when he talks about foreign policy. I think his time in the Senate, he mentioned it during the press conference, that he was chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee for many, many years, right? And he's touted his relationships with world leaders since he really started running for president 4 years ago. And I think that really comes through when he speaks, even contemporaneously like he did today, and he's really solid on that. But as you mentioned in your open, right, there were some fumbles, there were some gaffes, there were some mistakes, and I think that is, unfortunately for him, what people are going to remember, right? The mistaking Trump for Harris, that's what's going to get all the play on social media tomorrow and into the weekend.
Now, his contender, his direct competition, Donald Trump, has had a series of gaffes as well in the course of many, many months. I think Biden in this case said, look, as I did 20 campaign events since the debate, what has Trump been doing? This is a question of both men's fragility and their power. When you looked at him here tonight, do you think people will look past those mistakes and say, you know what, that debate was indeed just a bad night?
I don't. I think that it's very difficult, as you mentioned in your open again, right? It's hard for people to unsee what they saw 2 weeks ago. And even his interview with George Stephanopoulos from not that long ago, a few days ago, there were some similar concerns, right? I think his press conference was better than the debate, but I don't think it's going to put those questions of his ability to finish the campaign and, frankly, lead the country for another 4 years. It's not putting those to bed.
So let's talk about the walls that are closing in on all circles. We have Hollywood, you have George Clooney. Some people who are conspiracy theorists say that Barack Obama encouraged George Clooney to close in and print that op-ed, essentially asking him to step aside. Other congressional leaders, in public, they're saying we support him, but we're understanding in private there are some deep concerns. How much do those concerns play into a part of what he decides to do here?
If it's congressional, say members of the House, members of the Senate, you showed Congresswoman Skolton there from around the Grand Rapids area coming out today and saying he should step aside. I don't think those matter at all for Joe Biden. I think that it's his close confidants, it's his family, it's his advisors and loyal and trusted confidants that he's had for decades that are really going to be the ones who influence him, if at all, right? He seemed incredibly dug in and incredibly committed to seeing this campaign through.
If something was to happen where all of a sudden he started losing that mojo and we noticed the debate guy coming back, if you will, and they decide, the Democratic Party, that we have to move forward with somebody else, what does that look like when it comes to delegates and donors and, let's say, VP Harris?
I think she is the only option at this point. I mean, practically speaking, the Biden campaign could transfer the money the president mentioned in his news conference. They've got $220-some million in the bank, right? That's a sizable amount of change that somebody else would have to go and raise. He could transfer that to a Harris for President campaign committee, and they would be able to hit the ground running. I also think that it'll be very difficult for Democrats to pass over the sitting vice president of the United States for somebody else. Be it Gretchen Whitmer, Gavin Newsom, J.B. Pritzker, or find somebody else in the Democratic Party. I think passing over the sitting vice president is crazy talk.
Even if she's not popular, relatively speaking?
Absolutely. I mean, if he were not president, it would be her, right?
Sure.
And that's almost the line of succession, right? We often see vice presidents run either for like a third term of the,
sure.
If the president served 2 terms, they follow up with that. They rarely win, but you know, they are the next in line.
Who does it help or hurt if they do a shakeup and they put someone else instead of Biden? Does it help the Democrats? Does it help Trump?
It depends. You know, I think that it depends who that other candidate would be. I think there are some Democrats out there, Gretchen Whitmer being one, frankly, who could put up a pretty good fight against Donald Trump. She's got some work to do. She would have some work to do nationwide and especially in the battleground states to make sure people knew who she was and
sure.
Build that name recognition. But, you know, she's positioned herself
in a pretty good place.
Pretty well, certainly compared to somebody like Gavin Newsom.
Last question. Give Biden a grade today in terms of his performance. What would you give him?
B-,
which is better than the debate.
It is, but not, you know, it wasn't that home run that I think he needed to just snuff out all the questions.
Well, Dave Dooley, always good to see you. Thanks for joining us here
Thanks.
tonight on our show. We appreciate you staying up with us. We are keeping the conversation about President Biden's speech going after the break. Next, a former Democratic Congresswoman who spent some time with the president and a lot of time in Washington, and a conservative consultant here at home. They're in the hot seat. But before we go to break, more of your thoughts on Biden. Travis Bickle says the onus has shifted from what should Biden do. He's apparently swimming upstream, and the current becomes stiffer by the minute. I think a week from now, he will have relented. And Invisible Michigan says, simply, indivisibly, excuse me, saying, quote, he's been the most effective president in recent history. You're voting for an administration. And let us know your thoughts. We'd love to hear from you. We'll be right back. Back now on The Pulse, covering all things people, power, and politics. Reacting to President Biden's news conference this evening, I'm joined now by former Democratic Congresswoman Brenda Lawrence and conservative consultant Jamie Rowe. We always say about our good friend Brenda, she was also the mayor of Southfield, of this great town, so welcome home. Let's talk about President Biden. Do you think it was a return to the Biden that the Democrats wanted to see? He, at the end of his speech tonight, said, I wanted to do this to help allay people's fears. Fears allayed?
It's better. He acknowledged, and to me that was very important for him to acknowledge, he really did bad on that debate. But he was able to articulate and describe our foreign policy. He was able to walk through that and explain it. You know, this thing called a democracy is about a one-on-one vote. My relationship with you, you want to run for my vote. And he still has some work to do, but I don't think he was a lot better than the debate. And I think he did well to reassure some people that he's ready for the task at hand.
But saying a lot better than the debate is saying like he was better than, you know, a D- or an E. He almost failed the debate by any means. So when you look at how he did today, was it good in contrast, or was it good for a president who can lead this country?
I think it was good for a president because he was talking policy, and foreign policy is an issue that not everyone can get up and articulate and talk about. And he has a grasp on it. He understands it. And he kept reminding us, I was a senator. Did he call the vice president Trump, which is a weird connection. But in reality, he went for I don't know how many minutes, but he was able to hold his own,
So, Jamie Rowe, a little bit of word soup happens with this president often, you notice. He'll take a thought about one thing, and as he's answering a question, just kind of add a bunch of words together and see what comes out. Is that reason to truly be concerned about the competency of a president?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, this isn't the first time. The debate wasn't the first time we've seen major gaffes from Joe Biden on a variety of issues. You know, tonight I think he did well enough to survive to fight another day, which is probably the worst news for the George Clooney's and the David Axelrods and company who are working like crazy to try and move him aside and put somebody else into that spot.
They wanted to energize the Democratic base to say, we need somebody else. And tonight, the president delivered the old version of the president.
Yeah, I mean, the president went down his list of hand-chosen reporters to ask him the questions. He stuck mainly to an issue where he does feel comfortable in, which is foreign policy. Didn't talk about the border. didn't talk about the economy in depth, didn't talk about a lot of other policy issues that have given him supreme trouble, like him talking in the debate that he had, killed Medicare, or we finally
yeah, you said we finally killed Medicare,
yeah,
to which Trump says you did. But Jamie, I want to ask you a question about
beat Medicare.
Beat Medicare, former President Trump. We have had a bit of word soup from him as well. We have had from the 77-year-old mistakes made where he didn't know he was talking about Nancy Pelosi versus somebody else. He's mistaken Barack Obama for others, and he's done this time and time again. Why doesn't that concern you if the guy from the Republican side is doing the same thing?
I've done it too. I'll just say this: I've done it too. I think I've done it on your show before.
We all have. We're human.
We're
not AI robots, right?
Yes.
We don't. President Trump has not done it at the volume that President Biden has had such issues.
But does it concern you to have two people who there have been doubts about their cognition, their abilities? I mean, do you think Trump is cognitively able to handle the job better than Biden?
Yes. Okay. I watched President Trump do his rally in the 90-plus degree heat down in Miami the other day, and when he went on for about an hour and a half and did a great job. Talked about policy, talked about issues, was funny, got the crowd fired up. President Trump is with it, and right now, I'll tell you what, he's on message. He knows what he stands for, and he's going to fight for what he stands for. And I think a lot of the people, particularly our base, trust him. And I think that's the difference that you're going to see next week at the Republican National Convention. You're going to see a united Republican Party.
Consistency is important, and with both Trump and Biden, it is safe to say we have seen inconsistent stories. At one point, we have Trump who goes off the handle, talking about golf games for 9, 12 minutes at a time, saying, I'm going to pledge $1 million to a charity. But at the debate itself, Trump says, let's not act like children and talk about a golf game. You have Biden, who has a good day, and then suddenly has a bad day, and then has a good day again. Brenda Lawrence, do Americans deserve better than these two guys?
I think America has gone through a process that we own and we're proud of. It has produced these two men who are running to be the president of our United States.
But do we deserve better than these two?
Our democracy determines that. And I can sit there and say I deserve to be a millionaire, but the scheme of things, my work, my efforts, and everything else is not producing that. But let me be very clear about something. If we put the camera on Donald Trump at the scrutiny that we're doing President Biden, it will be equal, if not worse, on Donald Trump's side. And I say that because you can say that Biden has gaps and whatever, but Donald Trump lies. He says things that are not true. You have yet to have any reporter say that's not true. He mispronounced words and he used the words in the wrong context.
And he doesn't do, both of these men avoid confrontational interviews. They both do interviews with friendly fire. Both of them are guilty of that, but it is an important conversation, one that in earnest starts here tonight for this next chapter. We want to thank you, Jamie Rowe and Brenda Lawrence, for joining us here today. After the break, we are speaking with a man who's taken the pulse of politics for decades, why he says the Democrats could benefit from convention chaos. Welcome back to The Pulse, diving into all things people, power, and politics. And we're getting unique perspective tonight from a man who's had his finger on the pulse of Michigan and American politics for decades. Steve Mitchell is the head of Mitchell Research and Communications and actually worked for the Reagan-Bush campaign back in 1984. And he says what we're seeing now is unprecedented, but quite simply, he says President Biden is a losing candidate for Democrats.
I don't think there has ever been anything in American history that matches what's been happening as a result of that debate. It was clear finally for the first time to many of those who either denied it or didn't want to believe it that there are serious mental acuity problems with President Joe Biden. And since then, we've watched a really incredible series of events where really, if you go into private meetings with the Senator Schumer or the other leadership of the House and Senate with Hakeem Jeffries, they want Biden off the ticket because Biden is going to be a drag, and it's going to make it very difficult for the Democrats to retain both the House and the Senate.
But despite that, today's performance was better, according to so many. But does that change anything? If it does, and they still decide to replace Biden, they talked about a number of candidates who could do that if Biden does step aside. Take a look. No surprise. One of them is our own governor, Gretchen Whitmer, but another name, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro.
The argument for Pennsylvania is, quite frankly, there's more electoral votes in Pennsylvania. And so Josh Shapiro might be the choice. But I would think those two are the strongest candidates. And I'm not saying Governor Whitmer because we're in Michigan or in Detroit, but rather because of the footprint she's had and the fact that she's a governor of one of the most important states that we have.
So then the next question, if they open it up, wouldn't that be chaotic at the convention? Mitchell says yes, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. And he gave us a little history lesson, 1956, where they opened up the ballot for vice president at the DNC. Senator Estes Kefauver beat John F. Kennedy on the second ballot. Republican President Eisenhower won re-election, but what happened was there were a ton of eyes on the VP race.
I can't imagine in the 24-hour news cycle what we're going to see if they open up the convention to a battle for the presidential nomination. It will be unprecedented. It will be riveting. And the ultimate candidate that comes out is going to look like a real winner because they overcame so much.
Maybe that's Joe Biden overcoming what happened 2 weeks ago and then having better days now. We shall see. The Democratic National Convention is next month in Chicago. The Republican Convention is next week. And some breaking news tonight. This man who's vying for your vote in the Republican race for Senate will speak at the RNC. Mike Rogers, former Michigan congressman, now running for Senator Stabenow's seat, is the favorite in the Republican primary. We're working to find out what day he'll speak. The convention runs next Monday through Thursday. We'll have reports all week long right here on The Pulse. And that is The Pulse tonight. Remember, you can always reach out to me on my phone anytime. Let me know what you think. Hit me up on social media, on my email. Take your pick. I read them all. And I don't care if it's good or bad. I want to hear from you. Extra is next. I'm Rup Raj. We'll see you tomorrow night.
Yo.